Hello, Nancy Krebs. Lovely to see you today, and thank you for joining me on my first podcast.
This is your first one.
My first one. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
feel so honored to be a part
So
of this.
hopefully someone will listen to it. I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will. Let me tell the listeners a little bit about Nancy first, and then we'll get started. So I am going to read from my notes. So if you see me looking down, sorry everyone, but I do have to read. I don't want to miss anything here. Nancy's been a professional actor and singer since 1975, stage and screen. She's a certified Lessac Master Teacher. She's taught several Lessac intensive courses, one of which I was a participant at, and I think it was the 2018 when I was thinking back this morning. I think that was the one. Nancy is a resident voice and dialect coach for Classic Theatre of Maryland. She's also an author, having contributed to 3 texts, and she's currently co-authoring a new book about how kinesensic strategies can help non-English speakers become more fluent and expressive. Nancy is also a singer, a songwriter, a musician, and a recording artist, and she's released 7 albums over the past few years of critically acclaimed Christian meditational music. So, wow, what an all-rounder. And my interest as a voice teacher and a product of your Lessac training, Nancy, is to talk to you about how Lessac has improved your voice as a singer and the ways you use it as a singer. And I think maybe to start with, there may be a whole lot of people who've never heard of Lessac or the term kinesensics. So maybe could you start with a bit of in a nutshell, philosophy of what Lessac is all about?
All right, Arthur Lessac, first of all, was a man, that's what we get the name Lessac, kinesensics. He actually coined the term kinesensics, which I'll get to in a minute. But he actually was a singer himself, and he was an actor, and he applied all of the work that we do in the Lessac work to himself, basically. He was his own guinea pig. He died at 101 years old in 2011, still teaching in Croatia 2 weeks before he passed away. We all want to be him when we grow up. It's just simply, he was an amazing individual. And again, he used himself as sort of fertile ground upon which to delve deeply into to find out whether this work worked for him. And essentially what it is, kinesensics means, it's a term that he coined, kine from movement or motion, essence from the essence or the basic nature or study of, sens for inner spirit or sensation, sick for familiar occurrences or familiar events as we call them, or it pertains to the individual or the original. And so what that means altogether is this is a feeling-based process whereby you identify sensations, you recognize those sensations and maybe attribute some kind of descriptor to that sensation. Then you are aware of the description as well as the sensation and how you cognitively understand that feeling that you're experiencing. And then you respond to that sensation and its sense memory of how it went into you. And so we're always looking for what does it feel like? Not what does it sound like, but what does it feel like? A sensation, sort of as if we were humming on an M, for instance. If we were humming on an M in English, when I close my eyes and hum on that M, I'm immediately aware of sensation, whether that sensation is vibration or whether it's just a buzzy feeling. Maybe I don't have a name for it if I'm new to this experience, but eventually I learn what that is. I recognize it, I sort of memorize that sensation, and then I can reproduce it. So it is a constant biofeedback that the singer or the performer is engaged in, and that is Lessac kinesensics.
Wonderful, wonderful. I certainly got a lot out of the course, and it was an eye opener because it made me so much more self-aware of what I was feeling in my body, and I think that that's something that we could cultivate in singers, to become aware of what they're feeling, because so many people seem to be thinking about their voice rather than letting it become a feeling and sensing thing. Yeah, great. So tell me, Nancy, or tell us, where you started with your singing. How did you get into singing?
It's a funny story. It's a little family story. Obviously, I don't really recall it, even though it's been told so many times that I think I know what they're talking about. I was 3 years old. I was in church, and I was raised as a Roman Catholic, so there's a lot of kneeling going on. So I was 3 years old, and I was standing in the pew, which is the seat, right? The seat arrangement. Then there's a kneeler in front of that pew. So all the people were kneeling down, my parents included. And there was this long expanse of empty pew to either side. And my parents had just bought me a pair of patent leather shoes. And I was admiring them, and I thought they really sound kind of neat. And I started tap dancing down this empty pew away from my parents, singing at the top of my lungs, "Nancy Krebs is in church. Nancy Krebs is in church." Of course, my parents were mortified, and they kept motioning to people beside them, "Get her back here," like this. Because meanwhile, there's this very reverential moment in the mass setting, and there's this kid screaming at the top of her lungs, or singing at the top of her lungs, "Nancy Krebs is in church." So that was my introduction to singing, and all the attention that I got, negative or positive, gave me some kind of feedback that made me want to continue to sing. So that's my introduction to singing. Later, after I was 3, when I was 11 or 12, 13, I started becoming interested in the theater, and as well as the violin. I trained as a violinist before I trained as any kind of singing. But I found this wonderful little company for kids called the Children's Opera Company. And it was run by 2 wonderful ladies who loved the idea of operettas and young people, preteen and teenagers. And so I started, singing and acting with that company at the age, I think, of 13. And I stayed with them until I was about 17 or 18. And it was a wonderful feeding ground for me. No, it didn't teach me how to sing. It just gave me an opportunity to sing. And sometimes we just learn by doing. So I may have had poor habits or habitual awarenesses back then, but it didn't seem to hurt me, because when I went into college, my undergraduate, I found a really good singing teacher there and in my undergrad that helped me understand how to use my voice. And it's surprisingly very similar to what Arthur eventually I became acquainted with, his work. It was very feeling-based. It was not repetition or rote drill or ear training. It was primarily learning through feeling. And so I have to thank Dr. John Taylor and later on Dr. Elizabeth Elrod for their understanding of how the voice wants to work when free of adverse conditions or adverse conditioning, which is what Arthur's work is all about. How can we find the optimal use of our bodies and our voices?
Yeah, great. And what sort of, once you started studying Lessac, what elements of that did you find were most useful as a singer?
Well, let me just back up. I learned that I became acquainted by the Lessac work when I was in graduate school. So flash forward out of my undergrad, graduating with a BA in theater, went to the Dallas Theater Center, which is in Dallas, and it was a wonderful company of actors who taught, or actors who facilitated. So they were professional actors, but they also had degrees in education. So it was a very hands-on graduate program that you would graduate with an MFA in acting. And I was introduced to the Lessac work there by Randy Moore and Norma Levin. They were a married couple who had just taken an 8-week workshop with Arthur Lessac way up in upper state New York, and came back, flush with their success, and they thought they would start to teach it. And I'm not sure how great that was, or how wonderful that intro was, but to me, it was revolutionary. I'd like to think that Randy and Norma understood that work very, very well. And I had an opportunity, actually, decades later, to thank Randy in person, because, I'll say right before COVID, I was in Denver, and went to the Denver Center for the Arts, which is an professional acting studio, acting theater. And Randy was in residence there as an actor. Granted, he was 30, 40 years later, but because he was like in his 20s when I first became acquainted with the work. Mm-hmm. So here he is, a man in his mid-60s, maybe closing in on 70. And I was so moved to be able to tell him, Randy, you planted the seed, and now I am a master teacher of this work because I fell in love with it so much. What I found helpful about it and revolutionary is Arthur always used to say, when you speak, do you feel like you're singing? When you walk, do you feel like you're dancing? So what is the element or what are the aspects of singing that he was talking about? Well, he was talking about melody in the voice. He's talking about focus. Where is the voice placed, for instance? A lot of singing teachers call this placement, right? Well, placement is kind of a destination. Arthur considers it a journey forward, so it's not a destination, but a direction. So my focusing of my voice is going to be moving forward. That came under the head of tonal energy, feeling the vibratory sensation, moving forward on the hard palate to the gum ridge, and then moving upward through the nasal bone, into the forehead, into the cranium. So I am accessing all the bones of the face and the head. That was the first time anyone had said that, quite like that. Now maybe my other singing teachers touched on it a little bit, didn't use those terms, focusing the voice, but we were not necessarily singing as much as we were speaking at the Dallas Theater Center, but we also did musicals. So we just transferred all that information that we were learning as speaking actors into our sung versions of our voices. So all that sort of focusing and melody and then consonant energy for clarity just made all the sense to me in the world, and also supported by what we call structural energy, which is the house in which all this vibratory sensation is taking place. The flexible sound box that's right here that I can shape and change in order to get more wave reflection as well as additional resonance into the head. So all of this was like, aha, light bulbs, and it transformed my singing and my speaking voice. For the better, I will say.
And when you say transformed, what was the major elements of that transformation?
Well, my voice was always, I was a lyric soprano. I know I don't sound like a lyric soprano right now, but you know, our voices are much more rangy than we give them credit for. We tend to, I remember when I was in undergrad, I was told by my singing teachers, do not speak in your lower register, keep it in the soprano. Keep it up here because otherwise you'll lose those upper notes. That is totally false. That is not true. And I didn't know that until I went to the Dallas Theater Center and started being introduced to the Lessac work, where we started accessing my lower notes through what we call the Y buzz, which is Y-E-E, basically. It's the sound of E, which is a really focused sound right at the gum ridge, moving up, sort of underneath the bones of the face and the head, right under the nasal bone, right up into here, and then into the cranium. When I discovered that, it lowered the pitch of it accessed more notes in my lower register as a singer and as a speaker, but it did not change the fact that I could go into the higher registers with my soprano voice. So first of all, it gave me more range that I could access. Secondly, it added to the depth of my voice. I had a rather thin voice. A lyric soprano is not strong. I mean, it's a lovely sound, but it's a very bel canto sound, you know, the lyric, as opposed to the dramatic soprano, right, which has more power, more potency, if you will. But I learned that I could access a lot more power without pain, strength without strain, using Arthur's work, the kinesensic work, that just changed my voice, the power of my voice. I'm a small woman. I'm 5'2". I weigh maybe about 115 pounds. I'm not big, but I have a very big voice. And I attribute that to the Lessac work and my continuing to use it through the decades that I've been singing.
Great. Yes, that's so interesting. And I agree with the notion that actors end up being pretty darn good singers just because of the training that they get on their vocal use.
Mm-hmm.
And because I used to wonder, so many actors come out of NIDA and other acting studios in Australia and they can sing and around the world. And I think, how does that happen? Because they're not trained to sing But the work is so similar to using the voice for singing. They will intone. They call it intoning, where they'll produce a vocal line of text that's uninterrupted. And I, as a singer, listened to that and went, "That's singing." But they don't call it that. They go, no, we're not singing. So yeah, so they do. And I think that's a fascinating crossover. The crossover between what we teach voice for speech and text to how we use it for singing. You've talked about the lower register and the Y buzz. What about your higher notes, and what elements of Lessac have you found helpful in your, and you're a voice teacher yourself, Nancy, you have your own voice studio, for helping students to access freedom in their higher registers?
I have to think about that only because only recently have I discovered that many singers, as they reach a certain age, men not so much as women, have issues with the mixed voice or the passaggio. They start losing the facility, and I believe, I don't think I'm wrong in this, because Kitty Bertolini Abbott, who is one of the leading speech language pathologists in the United States, and I are contemporaries. And we talk a lot about, because she's a singer, I'm a singer, I say, I'm really having a lot of trouble with my passaggio. We call it passaggio. Other people call it mixed voice, okay? I'm saying, why am I having that problem? And we both felt like it was because we as instructors, or we as facilitators, spend and have spent so much time in the Y-buzz range. Because when I speak, I'm speaking in my Y-buzz range, I'm not accessing those upper notes. I'm not using them on a regular basis unless I'm singing, in church or singing professionally. Then I get to use those upper registers. So what we've noticed is, if we couple using our Y-buzz range, when we're, let's say we're in an intensive situation like what you were in. You were in the 3-week version. I just finished teaching a 4-week version. And we spend a lot of time in weeks 2 and 3 accessing that lower register. We have to offset that by singing up in the soprano range. I literally do. I'll go, if we're doing for about a half an hour, we're all doing feed, breeze, seize, key, all that lower work that's very focused. We'll say, all right, let's rest our voices. Let's rest our voices by doing it up in the higher registers. So if I just pop the octave and go up high, same Y-E-E sound, it's not a Y buzz anymore, but it's a Y, what we call the Y French horn. The Y French horn is actually a consonant. It's a vowel-like consonant, but if you take all that pressure off the vocal folds by allowing the upper register to be present, you're working both, work is a hard word to use, you're accessing, shall we say, you're accessing both ends of the spectrum of your range. So that's what I've started to do for myself and for anybody else that's taking this work for any length of time. And believe it or not, nobody had any vocal strain or fatigue, because we did that sort of, all right, we've done a lot of work down low. We've done a lot of call work, which is the strong, focused tone for carrying power. Let's do the same thing, but let's use the upper register. Maybe go up an octave or several notes, so you're no longer in the lower third of your range, you're in the upper third of your range. And it takes all that pressure away. And so that's helping my passaggio. That's giving me access, because there are 2 sets of muscles, aren't there?
Yes, there are.
That are within the vocal folds, right? That are supporting on all sides. Well, we have to be able to access all of those muscles, not just a few. Otherwise, the others become atrophied.
Yep. They just don't want to work anymore. Use it or lose it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the answer to the passaggio problem for me, by just popping that octave or remaining up there, and also doing a lot of explorations that involve not moving my facial structure very much, but going up in octave, such as this. I hope this is transferring over. It's not peeking out on the
No,
microphone. I
it's not.
suspect.
No.
Okay. If I want ooh, 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 as opposed to because that's really channeling the vibrations. That's changing the structure of the passage, and I don't want to do that. I want to maintain the same passage size and shape. I just simply want to change the octave, and that makes the vocal folds work in a different way. It forces them, not force again is a word that has effort. It enables them to be able to move all sets of muscles rather than just relying on just a couple of sets of those muscles. Those lower, or I can't remember their names, I never can, the crackoid and
The TA and the CT, I think we call.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah. So I think I want to make sure that I'm using all of them. So I'm going to use my Lessac training, my awareness of that, even if I have a wonderful singing teacher, let's say right now, who specializes in the female passaggio. He and I can talk together. He'll use different terms. I'll say, oh, that's very much like the Y buzz up an octave. I can do that. And I won't change the shape of my lips. I won't bring them forward. I'll just remain neutralized. And that's going to enable those muscles to work more effectively instead of being atrophied as they are wont to be after a certain age.
That's really interesting, Nancy, and aligns with some work I've been reading from Ken Bozeman, who is a wonderful guy who has written books about the voice and scientifically looking at the acoustic resonances that we can access from the shape of our resonators and how that affects how well the voice works, how easy the voice is to use. And one of the things, I was watching a video of him on YouTube, and one of the things he said was that to go from the chest register, M1 we sometimes call it, up or into that head register, is to do exactly that, to not change anything but start where you are in your chest register, and then just send it on up without doing a lot of change to it. And it can be because people change things inside, or they add tension somewhere in their head and neck because they think they're going up high, and it's just a frequency change, really. And that is very helpful, very helpful. So it's along the same lines.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
I wrote his name down so I could look him up.
Yeah, he's great. He's got a couple of really great books. And lots of videos now he's getting online. Thanks, Ken, because you can do a short little synopsis of something on a YouTube clip. Great. So let's talk a little bit more about the you haven't mentioned the body energies so far. You've talked about consonant energy, tonal energy, and consonant energy. Yeah. So how have you, or do you access anything to do with the body energies when you're performing or singing?
Well, let's face it, you can't, the voice lives within the body, right? It's the only instrument we possess that lives solely within our bodies. As such, we don't sing with just our voices, we sing with the whole body. We've all seen people that just are talking heads or singing heads, and the body is just along for the ride. When you know the body energies, and I know that may be new for some people, what does that mean, body energy? Well, there are three, what we call self-to-self body energy states of being, one of which is called potency, which is based on reaching. So each of the body energies has what we call a fueler and a feeder. The fueler is an essence or some kind of substance, whether real or imagined. And then there's a feeder, which is an action that we take, or a series of actions. So in potency, it is based on, the fueler is the chemical interaction in the muscles themselves, and it's fed by the act of reaching. So if I'm reaching for the camera, or reaching above me, or reaching beyond me, it has a power, it has a strength, it has an extension. I can imagine using that strength, that power, if I'm doing a really dramatic piece of music. Because that power is not just going to be in my voice, but it's being supported by everything that surrounds the voice. And so it helps me to become more expressive in that way. Like an oratorio, like I think I was mentioning to you a little while ago before this podcast about maybe Handel's Messiah. You're wonderful, lum da da ba 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 bum bum. You know, all of that. The choir or the chorus is singing that wonderful section of the oratorio. Why not use potency in the body? And if, as a choir director or a choral director, I might suggest that to my choir, but I'd have to share that with them first. You know, I'd like to get them to understand on a very physical level, what does potency mean? What does it feel like? And so you can't do it, you know, unless you've experienced it. You just can't talk about it and just say, oh, you get the idea? Okay, great, I'm so happy. All right, so let's sing. No, you really have to take a half an hour or 45 minutes and really feel that body energy. Feel that reach, feel that power, feel that strength. Experience that, and then carry it into your singing. It's probably going to add more response in your voice. It's going to be much more, there's strength, there's more tonal quality in the voice when I'm using potency, as opposed to, let's say, buoyancy, which is the second body energy. It is fueled by oxygen, fed by breathing. So we cannot feel buoyant, and buoyancy is the sense of feeling light, airy, weightless, anti-gravitational, calm, focused, feeling of floating. So if I'm feeling like I'm floating, so the fueler is oxygen, the feeder is breathing, so I have to breathe. Of course, I have to breathe when I sing, right? So I'm going to have to breathe in order to feel that buoyancy quality. And it might even add a little breathy quality to my voice as a choice. I'm not saying it should. I'm just saying as a choice, you know, the sort of Marilyn Monroe school of singing. Happy birthday, Mr. President, right? It has a certain quality to it. Or it may simply transfer into a sense of ease and lightness, a light quality to the voice. Some enchanted evening, you may see a stranger. Right? It might be really easy or legato feeling. Now that's buoyancy. And I'm just breezing through them. I'm not spending much time on them, just by way of an introduction. And the third self-to-self body energy is called radiancy. It's fueled by electrical impulses in the body and fed by muscle shaking. So that feeling of, ooh, that quivery feeling or that excited feeling that comes when you're anticipating something wonderful coming your way, that's radiancy. So if I have that sense of radiancy as I'm singing, my face is going to light up like a peacetime Christmas tree, as my mother used to say. And there will be a smile hinting at the corners of my eyes. And it's playful, and it's curious. And it's like, oh, I don't know, think of one of the songs in a musical where the character is just, you know, on top of the world. Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day, right? That's very radiant. So these are the three self-to-self body energies. And yes, do they change the way I sing? Absolutely. I just have to remember to use them, right?
So it's a conscious, so you consciously think about, do you plan ahead and think, well, this part of the song, maybe this phrase could be, you know, could be buoyant, and then I'll change my body energy into potency because I need a big, strong finish.
Well, my answer to that is I'm not going to plan it ahead of time. I'm going to explore that song first, all in buoyancy, even if it doesn't work for every part of the song. I'm simply going to employ buoyancy as I understand it, as I feel it, as I've experienced it in every part of the song, from start to finish. And then I'm going to put that in my pocket, okay? I did my buoyancy experiment. Now I'm going to do potency. all the way through, from the top to the bottom, from the beginning to the end, and see how that changes either the text, the lyrics, the melodic line. It might change the line itself. Obviously, we'll add more power. And it'll have a stronger kind of attack, if I can use that term. An attack, meaning how do I approach this? How do I get what I want, all right, from this song? Or then I'll go through it entirely in radiancy. Now, radiancy and buoyancy have different, what we call dialects, meaning a different way of experiencing that body energy. For instance, in buoyancy, we have what we call rising buoyancy, like a hot air balloon leaving the earth. And then we have what we call settling down buoyancy, that same hot air balloon descending to the earth. It's not crashing to the earth. It's not sinking to the earth. It is settling down. And then we have level or floating buoyancy, everything all on one level. So if I were singing with rising buoyancy, doing Some Enchanted Evening, it might be, some enchanted evening, you may see a stranger, as opposed to, some enchanted evening, you may see a stranger. Even though the melodic line is going up, I have a sense that I am descending, right? So they have this dialect. Potency just has directions. You're either reaching out with the strength, or you're reaching around, almost like a twisting, curving, curvilinear kind of feel that it's called a writhing. W-R-I-T-H-I-N-G, writhing, has a curving, twisting motion. So it just has directions. But radiancy has just the vibratory sensation of shaking, like any kind of shake. So some enchanted evening, that they may see a stranger, that kind of thing, as opposed to anticipatory radiancy. I can't wait for something to happen. Some enchanted evening, you may see a stranger. Or we have body humor, which is the essence of comic movement or comic creation of character. So some enchanted evening, you may see a stranger. Is it going to work? Probably not. Not with that lyric, okay? But if I took that same body humor and placed it all inside of me, and it wants to come out somewhere, it's going to come out in my face, in my eyes. And we call that flirtation. It's called like a subdialect. So, some enchanted evening, you may see a stranger. So even though I'm talking to myself, it's almost like there's an imaginary other that I'm including in this radiant, flirtatious moment. So that's what the body energies can do for us. An entire chorus can engage in this. So you as a director can give that direction. Once you've established what each of these body energies means, how do they feel, how would you describe this, by taking half hour, 45 minutes with each one of them and really experiencing them and then applying them to a song. It would be so,
Yeah.
I think, have you ever done that?
Yes, I have, and it's fascinating to see what happens. Recently, I worked with a group of singers, and I went through the body energies with them, had them experience them, and then we applied it to. I was trying to find a song that had obvious opportunities for these body energies to help. And the song I decided was the very beginning of Don't Stop Me Now by Queen. Mm-hmm. And so we applied the body energy. Well, I just asked them to sing it and see what they thought worked for each part of the song. And what they ended up doing was, what it starts with, tonight I'm gonna have myself a real good time. So that was radiancy, because it's all excited about tonight I'm gonna have myself, I feel alive. And on that breath we added that extra layer of anticipatory radiance, I feel alive, which added some potency into that, because that's a big sound. And then it goes into, and the world turning inside out. Yeah, I can't remember what we did there. But then on floating around in ecstasy, obviously buoyancy.
Obviously.
And then back to radiancy.
Uh-huh.
So don't stop me. So it was really cool and really interesting and something other than just thinking about your voice. It was using our bodies to kind of help us along the way and be freer.
What a fun thing. What a fun experience it was for them. That must have been revolutionary for them to recognize that, oh, my body is not just the vehicle, in which my voice resides, but it can also communicate. It can help the communication. It can help convey. It can be expressive too. Because it's going to show up in your eyes, it's going to show up in your face. So we learn just, you get so familiar with the music that you can take your eyes off the page from time to time, yes? Especially if you have a show chorus, that everyone memorizes the material.
Yeah, we
So
do that.
they are looking at you, they are looking at the audience, they might look at each other, if they're doing pick a little, talk a little from the Music Man, pick a little, talk a little, pick a little, talk a little, pick, talk a little, that sort of thing. It could be to one another, like little chirping birds. But yeah, I mean, I'm so glad that you are using it in that way and getting success.
Yes, yes. And the other thing that I'm finding is very useful is, and I'm not sure if this is particularly a Lessac thing or just a technique that I've picked up during my training, is to use a lot of instinctive sounds and along with that the instinctive gestures that go with it to find frequencies and notes that singers thought they can't sing because that's out of my range.
Uh-huh.
And so we start with some instinctive sounds that aren't singing at all, like doing I call it the nosy neighbour. It's one of my favourites, where the neighbour will do a yoo-hoo, and
Mm-hmm.
everyone knows how to do that. And I just say, could you do me a nosy neighbour, and I'll do it back to you. And away they go with this beautiful, clear,
Mm-hmm.
easy tone that's flowing out, and no one's caring about what frequency, what note it is,
Right.
and doing a big yawn stretch with the vocalization that goes really high, and usually it's very clear and open.
Mm-hmm.
And then talking about that with the student as to, well, what did that feel like? And so you were telling me earlier that you were having trouble with top C, and let's just see how if we put those sounds through a frequency analyzer, I think you'd find it was a lot higher than that.
Uh-huh. That's right.
How does
Yeah.
that work? And then they
That's
go, oh
wonderful.
yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That vocalization of things that aren't necessarily singing, but can be actually their higher notes. That yoo-hoo, even for men doing that in their falsetto. Yoo-hoo. You didn't think you could sing that high. Woo. Well, you're doing it easily. You're doing it instinctively because your body knows how to do it.
Yep.
We overthink everything, right? Especially young singers just starting out, or even mature singers who have sort of lost their way or lost the connection to the body wisdom itself, the body that knows how to do this anyway. So yeah, I love that instinctive sounds, you know, and
And
instinctive
so,
gestures.
yeah, Nancy, tell us a little bit about performing, because you do a lot of performing, both as an actor and as a singer. And how have you found, what are some of the techniques you've found from Lessac or other avenues that have helped you in putting across an authentic performance on stage?
Well, if we're talking about acting, it's a slightly different approach than when I'm singing. Although I've been in lots of musicals recently. The one that comes to mind is Cabaret, the musical Cabaret. And I played Fräulein Schneider. And a wonderful role for anybody my age to play. And I had the best, Herr Schultz, who is the love interest. They are the love interests to each other in 1931 Berlin. And it's just a gorgeous musical. To create character, whether I'm doing Shakespeare, because it's the classic theater of Maryland. And I gave up acting for a couple of decades. I was a professional actor for many, many years. and stopped acting, I want to say in 2006, to focus my attention on being a dialect and vocal coach. I started becoming a vocal coach in 1994 when I opened up my studio and I started branching out. I was still acting, but I wanted to attend to people's voices because there were no vocal coaches in this area, in the Baltimore, Washington area that I was aware of. So I hung out my shingle and I started getting some jobs that were local, and I learned on the job how to do that, how to do a British accent, for instance. No one's asked me yet for an Australian accent. I will certainly be coming to you if I need help with that. Because the O, your O is so different than any other O. I'm sorry, it's really, really different. And no one can tell me how to produce it. Because as a Lessac trained person, I want to know what you're feeling. All right, so write that down.
I'm writing it down.
At some point in time. But when I am developing a character in rehearsal, and for me, because I am the resident voice and dialect coach for the classic theater, I always get my script weeks ahead of time so I can memorize them before I start rehearsal, because when I'm in rehearsal, I don't have time to learn them because I'm working with every actor when I'm not on stage. So I'm not off somewhere learning the text. So I do that ahead of time so I am prepared to go on stage and do what I need to do. While I'm rehearsing that text, before we even go into rehearsal, I do what we call explorations. These are not techniques. Arthur's work was never a technique. He didn't like that word because it sounded too technical. And he said, this work is not technical. This work is for yourself, by yourself, with yourself. It is an approach to voice and to body training that is totally organic. It is not, do this 5 times and then do this. The word technique has gotten a bad reputation, I'm sure, because most people don't feel that or don't intend for it to be technical at all. But it has that connotation, and so I always get a little knee-jerk reaction when someone says, so what is your technique? I said, don't have one. I have an approach, all right, and my approach is to start with every line and explore it for tonal energy, structural energy, consonant energy. I'll do probably a pass-through with doing it in buoyancy, radiancy, potency. And on the strength of all of that, each one of these lines is going to have a particular feel to it, a particular stress or emphasis. And so many different times I've gone through that line that whenever the director asks me for something new or different, I can provide that because I've already been there. So there's nothing etched in stone until we get into actual stand up and rehearse. Here's the blocking, here's the sit around the table and talk about the characters, the table work, and then the blocking, and then the refining, and then the tech, and then everything else. I've already done that work. I've already done my exploration, which may change, right? Depending on what that staging is going to be or what my relationships with another character are going to entail. But I feel that I'm so ready, and I've said these lines and experienced these lines so many different ways before I even come into day one of rehearsal, that I have just on a dime, I can change direction if given different direction. Somebody says, this scene needs more drive, Nancy. As the nurse in Romeo and Juliet, which I played the nurse, wonderful role. The direction was, this scene needs to be more playful. You're always playing with Juliet because you've known her since she was a baby. Oh, well, what am I going to use? Radiancy, right? So I'm going to infuse radiancy into that scene in rehearsal because, bang, I'm there because I know how to feel radiant. I'll just choose the dialect, all right? Let's do anticipatory radiancy, or let's do body humor, or it's subdialect, flirtation, because we flirt with children, we flirt with babies, we flirt with an idea. Flirtation doesn't mean only that adult flirtatious behavior. It is playful curiosity. That's what it is. So if that's what I'm using, that scene's going to take on a whole different life. because the nurse is going to propel that scene with this radiancy. And Juliet, of course, is going to pick up on that, and she's going to respond to that. And so it changes everything. You know, it just does. It's so much fun, and it's so much fun.
So that leads me to probably my last question today, which is learning lines. And this is a question that's totally not for singing, because I personally have no trouble learning a song. I think because there's melody attached to it for me. But when I studied at NIDA and I had to learn monologues, I struggled big time until I figured out what the actors do, because I just asked the actors that were there, the trainee actors, how do you learn all these lines? But I'd love to hear your version of how you learn text, memorize it.
Two ways. And I don't forget my lines. Because I've gone through this exploratory process, so I've learned them physically. You know, I haven't just learned them intellectually. To be or not to be, that is the question. To be or not to be, that is the question. That's not what I do. Instead, if I've done it playfully with anticipatory radiancy, to be or not to be, that is the question. Or, to be or not to be, that is the question. If I've said it so many different ways, there is no way I can forget it, because it's in here. It's not just here. So first and foremost, by doing the exploratory process with the three body energies, with the three vocal energies of tone, consonant, and structure, I have a physical sense memory of those lines. Then I sing them. All right, you talk about singing, you don't lose your lyrics, right, because it's a melody attached. Well, if we do recitative with lines, all right, recitative is simply applying a note to every syllable. So if my line is, I left no ring with her, what means this lady? And I simply choose notes along the way. I left no ring with her, what means this lady? I left no ring with her, what means this lady? Or, I left no ring with her, what means this lady? I carry the sense of singing right into the spoken version, and I've attached melody to it to begin with. So what I come up with is inflection, the natural inflection, because I start to recognize, well, if I want to stress that word, I'm simply going to apply a higher note to that word. I left no ring with her, what means this lady? I left no ring with her, what means this lady? I'm not going to forget that line, because again, it's physical, isn't it? It's not intellectual.
Yeah, and that's so interesting and very useful, I think, to any budding actors or stage musical theatre people who have lines. And I found the same thing. It was the physicality of learning the lines. So rather than intellectualizing it, which is what I was trying to do, just sitting on the couch with trying to memorize, the actors that I spoke to said, oh no, that's never going to work. You've got to walk around the house and have your lines, but physically do gestures, pick up things, push things away. If it's a no, I don't want you to, I'm going over there, and overdo everything and use different locations. So go into the kitchen for one section and then move into a different room for the others. And pretty soon you've got it, because you keep doing those gestures and you have your lines in case, and then by the third or fourth day they didn't have the lines at all. They were just walking around the space saying the words with the inflections that they were exploring and doing a lot of physicality.
Again, what's the common thread here? It's all about the physical. It's all about the body. This is the way we started this entire, conversation, which is it's all about the body. The voice resides in the body. The voice is part of the body. So is the brain. So the thought process itself is actually not just a mental process. It's a physical process. Thinking is actually physical. So thinking, responding, feeling, it's all All of that is part of our inner environment that is housed within the body itself. That's why the Lessac work is now being called body voice training. Not just voice training, not just body training, but body voice, which is all one word. And we're now in the in ISMETA, ISMETA, which is I'm not sure I'm going to get this acronym right, ISMETA, which is the International Somatic Organization of Teachers of Body Work, all right? The International Somatic of Teaching Association, or whatever. But ISMETA, we are now, the Lessac work, we had to jump through a lot of hurdles and hoops, to be able to join them, because they have a very high degree of what's the word, standards, very high standards. And so if you are a body voice, or even a body organization that specializes in teaching or sharing or facilitating that, they need to see what your lesson plans are. They need to see what your curriculum is. They need to see how you employ your curriculum. What kind of situations are you in, like the intensive, for instance? Or is it small groups? Is it a small facilitator training workshop? We need to see what you do in order to accept you into our stable of organizations that specialize in body training. So that's why we're calling it body voice. And I think that's the new catchphrase anyway. Sort of like mindfulness, right, has become a catchphrase for really staying in the moment. Well, Lessac work is mindfulness for the body and the voice. It's really staying mindful. Because awareness, with a capital A, is the recognition of something positive being present or not. And if it's not present, what steps do I need to take to bring it from the negative to the positive? Such as my voice not being focused. If I recognize that my voice is in the back of my throat, and I recognize that, I'm aware of that, what steps do I have to take to get that voice forward so that it rests in the healthy locale, so it's not going to cause me damage or pressure on the vocal folds, which eventually causes problems.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's been wonderful, Nancy. Thank you so much for sharing all that wisdom with us. And I'm going to put into the show notes your complete bio so people can read all about you.
Thank you.
Also a link to the Lessac Institute, because I'm sure there are people that might like to learn more about that. There's been no sponsorship from Lessac or anything. It's just something that I'm passionate about. So, and happy to share all of that with everyone. And Nancy, you've just enlightened us a lot more about Lessac and a whole lot of other things. So thank you so much.
Thank you for what you're doing and for your chorus and sharing the work in your chorus, and using that group as an experiment, an ongoing experiment in using the body energies and the vocal energies. I wish you all the best with that and with this podcast. Congratulations. This is really wonderful.
Thank you. I'm calling it Unleashed, the voice unleashed.
Oh,
Singing unleashed.
Singing unleashed.
Yeah. Try and look at all the different ways that we can approach singing from not the beyond the traditional technical
well,
stuff.
If you think of a leash holding you back, right?
Yeah.
Unleashed means your voice is being set free, yes?
Yes.
You're set free this experience of singing, which should be joyful.
Yeah. That's
Right?
right. That's right.
Make
That's
a joyful noise, yes?
Yeah.
All right.
Right.